Good evening. My name is Michael Pope, and I'd like to thank you for joining us. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for asking me to moderate this evening. Looking forward to getting into the issues that are important to voters, and we look forward to a lively and respectful debate of the issues. Welcome to this candidates forum for the 44th District of the House of Delegates. I'd like to start by welcoming our candidates for the evening. So welcome to Richard Hayden and Delegate Paul Krizek. We appreciate you taking the time to be here and to answer questions that are on the minds of voters submitted by the members of League of Women Voters and attendees. So I'm going to go over the rules and then we'll get right into the questions. So bear with me, there's a few rules to get through here. All the candidates certified to appear on the November 2nd ballot were invited to participate. These candidates will have 1.5 minutes, or that's 90 seconds, for an opening statement, 1.5 minutes to answer each question, and then 2 minutes at the end for a closing statement. Each candidate will have the opportunity to answer the same questions. I'm going to ask the same question of both candidates. We will pose the question to the candidates in order that their names appear on the ballot. After the first round of questions, I'll pose the next question first to the second candidate, and so on and so forth. So the candidates will have 90 seconds to answer the questions. So our timekeeper, who you see on the screen there, will provide 30-second, 15-second, and stop alerts, and we will follow the timing rules strictly. So keep that in mind, candidates. The candidates and their campaigns may not record this event and are not permitted to use the pictures or videos of this forum found on the website, implying an endorsement of either candidate. After the forum, the candidates will be sent a list of questions that have been submitted, and you, the candidates, might answer them and post them on your website if you want to. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started. Richard Hayden, would you like to make an opening statement?
Yes, thank you, Michael. And thank you to League of Women Voters. I appreciate this opportunity to be part of this forum tonight. My name is Richard Hayden. I'm the Republican challenger in the House District 44, which encompasses Mount Vernon and a little piece of Hayfield. And I ran in 2019 and I'm running again in 2021 because I think it's important for our conservative values to be represented in Richmond. You know, it's not a majority rule system that we have here. We have a constitutional republic. And oftentimes what I'm hearing out there is that people who are in the minority, those people who aren't represented by their party or their beliefs, don't feel like their voice is being heard. And there's a lot of distress right now. There's distress in the community. There's distress over the state of our education system. There's distress over the fact that people want to defund the police. There's distress over the fact that boys are using girls' bathrooms. And there's the added economic stress of high taxes, which includes a gas tax, which the General Assembly put on the people, a recent bag tax, which was enabled by the General Assembly in Fairfax County, just voted in a nickel bag tax, which has a disproportionate effect on the poor and the lower income. So there's a lot of issues that are coming to people's attention that have them really concerned. And I got to say that the top issue really is the education issue. And hopefully we'll be dealing with a question on that, because I know that's the one hot button issue in the thousands of doors that I've been able to knock this summer. And it was a hot summer out there. That's the number one issue. And over the last few weeks and even the last few days, it's become an even hotter issue. And the thing is that we have to, as a General Assembly, we have a constitutional authority to make sure that our education system is the best system that it can be. And that's not happening right now. And we need to make a turnaround for that. So with that in mind, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to be here, to be part of this forum, and I appreciate everyone's attention. Thank you.
All right, Delegate Krizek, you have an opportunity to make an opening statement, so the floor is yours.
Thank you, Michael. Excuse me. Good evening, and thank you to League of Women Voters for inviting me here tonight. And thank you to all of you who are listening there at home. And I know we can't be there in person this year, but I'm very hopeful that this will be the last time that we do a Zoom debate. And next year we will be all together again over at Sherwood Hall Library or some other nice location. I also want to thank my opponent. I'm glad he ran again. I think it's important that you have a choice, and I respect him for doing that and putting himself out there. It's not easy. And I'm glad that, you know, the democracy works best when there's a two-party system. I also want to say that I've been going through some tough times recently with my parents just both passed away. We had a funeral this past Saturday. And so I'd like to dedicate my campaign to my parents, who my wife and I have been taking care of for these past 5 months as they've declined. And I know that they would be and are proud of me and are looking down on me from heaven right now, and are very supportive of my efforts. And they certainly were always my biggest campaign team. Whenever I needed a lit to be you know, sent out or mailed, they were the ones who licked the stamps and sealed the envelopes. So thank you, Mom and Dad. And I look forward to this debate and to talk about the critical issues facing our community and our Commonwealth.
Great. Well, let's get started. We're going to start this first question with Delegate Krizek. We get the first crack at the answer, then Mr. Hayden. So I want to start with the Redistricting Commission. So this Redistricting Commission has essentially failed to come up with maps for the General Assembly. They still got time to work things out, but that does seem doubtful. Delegate Krizek, what do you make of this impasse? And what do you hope happens with this important task of map making for the House districts and the Senate districts and the General Assembly?
Well, I was just down in Richmond today and I ran into I was at an appropriations meeting and I saw some of the redistricting folks going in. They had a meeting, I guess, in another room. It is disappointing that they couldn't come together and craft maps in time. Certainly it's not going to be in time we should right now be running under the new maps because the census, you know, took place last year and it finished and it didn't finish on time, unfortunately. The previous administration in the White House was unable to get it done, but it should, at least the Redistricting Commission should have drawn the maps and come to an agreement. But this is why I voted against the second time. I have to say, I was supportive in the beginning, but I knew that the way the constitutional amendments, and many of you maybe don't realize what happens with the constitutional amendment, it has to pass 2 General Assemblies with an election in between. And it cannot be vetoed by the governor. And then it goes to the voters to decide and make the final vote. And the second time through, it cannot be amended as well. So I was hoping that a bipartisan commission could work, but having any kind of partisanship is problematic. And you see that now, and that's why I did not support the final amendment. And I don't think we're going to get any maps, unfortunately. So it's going to go to the Supreme Court. And we will, and you know, we'll see what happens. I expect we won't know until maybe the end of the year.
And Mr. Hayden, same question to you. The Redistricting Commission has essentially failed to come up with maps for the General Assembly, and they do still have time to work things out, but that does seem doubtful at this point. What do you make of this impasse, Mr. Hayden? And what do you hope happens with this important task of map making for the General Assembly?
Well, it's always my hope that in redistricting, we can level out these districts because a lot of districts have gone one way or another, either too far Republican, too far Democrat, and we need to level those off a little bit. One of the things is if they do redistrict, there's a real possibility there's going to be a special election for the House of Delegates in 2022, and then we'll run again in 2023. So it's important that they get this done as quickly as possible. And it's my understanding that this last meeting or this last series of meetings between the bipartisan commission, that a map was pulled out by the other side, by the Democrats, that was never shown before. No one had seen this map before. And the map was, you know, totally in their favor. So it moved the goalpost, let's say. It moved the goalpost down to them. Rather than negotiate over what maps they had before them and the ones they were considering over the summer, they brought out this brand new map. And once they couldn't get that map to be considered or taken into consideration, then they walked out of the room and basically, you know, quit the negotiations. So I don't know if it's been done in good faith on their part. I think it should be. I don't know why they didn't do that. You know, there's an opportunity. There's got to be back and forth, give and take on this. And they don't seem to want to do that. So I don't understand it. And I just hope they can get back to the table and work this out.
All right, this next question is about human rights. We're going to start with Mr. Hayden and then go to Delegate Krizek. This is the question. Should transgender students be able to use the bathroom of the gender they identify with? And how should schools handle this situation? Mr. Hayden, we'll start with you.
Well, no. I think boys who are biological boys should use boys' bathrooms, and girls who are biological females should use female bathrooms. If you're familiar with what happened in Loudoun County recently, a 15-year-old boy put a skirt on and went into the girls' bathroom and then raped and sodomized a young woman in there. And then they went and the father showed up at the school board hearing and he was promptly arrested. And the Soros-backed prosecutor, Commonwealth attorney there, wanted to put him in jail. A prosecutor ran on no jail time for convicted felons, wants to put someone who had committed a breach of peace because his daughter had been raped under this policy, this Title IX policy. And it's unacceptable. There are certainly people who have gender dysphoria and it's a mental illness and that needs to be dealt with. But there's not, if you're born with, an XX or an XY chromosome, then you have to use the bathrooms that are appropriate for that reason. And under House Bill 257, which my opponent voted for, he voted for this, the schools didn't have to report this sexual battery that occurred in Loudoun County that would have protected that girl, or would have protected would have just reported and gotten this boy out of the system. So, I support repealing House Bill 257 when I get down to Richmond and protecting our school children against these policies.
Delegate Krizek, same question to you. Should transgender students be able to use the bathroom of the gender they identify with? And how should schools handle this situation?
Sorry, I have to unmute. I'm against discrimination of any kind. And that bill you're talking about that my opponent mentions has nothing to do with this subject. But I will say that the reason we got rid of that bill is because we're concerned about the school to prison pipeline, which is a real thing. And if the school is required to call police for every single infraction, you're going to have that's going to encourage the school to prison pipeline. Right now, every school will call if there's any kind of a serious offense like the one you mentioned. They will, of course, call. It doesn't say that they cannot call. It doesn't discourage them from calling the police. It just stops every single time there is something like, any kind of activity in the hallways, whatever. The police were being called too often, and that's why we passed that bill. So that is a different issue altogether. But as far as I respect young people's their decisions, and this is I think it's it is a education department decision, but I respect young people and their sexuality. I think it's a straw man that the Republicans are creating that to say that there's these crimes going on in the schools and that people, the kids. I mean, if somebody is going to rape somebody in a bathroom or attack somebody in a bathroom, I don't think it matters what the sex of that's allowed in that bathroom is. Okay, I see. I've got my time has ended.
All right, we're going to move on to our next question, which is about education. We're going to start with Delegate Krizek and then move to Mr. Hayden. So 20 years ago, Fairfax County was grappling with a group of parents who wanted to ban conservative books. And those parents essentially lost in the 2003 election. I haven't really heard a lot about the issue until this year. Delegate Krizek, what role should parents potentially have in, let's say, banning books from public school libraries? Should parents have a role in potentially banning books from public school libraries?
I'm not a big, I believe in freedom of speech, and I'm not a big fan of banning books. I remember when I was a kid, you had Tipper Gore that was destroying the LPs, the long player, the albums. Richard probably remembers those before the days of CDs and before online music. But there's one man's smut is another man's art. I do think though that parents, it's important that they participate in their local school board meetings and that they let their school board members know what concerns them, and they're doing that. And I think that's the process. That's the democratic process that needs to play out. These decisions are local decisions, but I would discourage folks from banning things, because we've had Huck Finn was banned, and in the past, and we go down that road. Who knows what's going to be banned next? I think it's a dangerous precedent to set, and it's a dangerous road to go down. So that's my position on it. There's a lot of, I think the parents also have a responsibility to, my daughter, she would, if she saw a book that she didn't want to read that had, had swear words or something in it, she would know she would understand it, and she would stay away from it if she felt uncomfortable. I think that's also a responsibility of parents to teach their kids the right and wrong of what they need to be reading and deciding. But I don't like the burning of books.
All right, Mr. Hayden, same question to you. So 20 years ago, Fairfax County was grappling with this group of parents that wanted to ban controversial books. But those parents essentially lost in the 2003 election. We haven't really heard a lot about that issue until this year. Mr. Hayden, what role should parents potentially have in banning books from public school libraries?
Well, it's not so much the banning of books. It's looking at the books and seeing what their content is and whether it's appropriate for that particular age. Terry McAuliffe said it in the last debate with Glenn Youngkin, that I don't think parents should be telling schools what to teach. And that's a big mistake, because parents need to be involved in their child's education. It's the most important thing that happens to them in their formative years. And we need to have that involvement. We want to have that involvement. It's a shame we don't. I went out to the last school board meeting here in Fairfax County, and I went out there because I was concerned about the content in the two books that were brought up at the prior school board meeting in August, which was Lawn Boy and Genderqueer. And they had to do with pornography and pedophilia. So, I don't want pedophilia on school bookshelves. I'm against that. I'm against that as a parent. I'm against that as a candidate. I'm against that as a human being. It shows a certain level of moral depravity to have that. What I want to see is, I want us not to be labeled as we were by the National School Board Association after they wrote to the White House and they weaponized the Department of Justice. We don't want to be labeled as domestic terrorists because we go and testify in front of a school board or go out there and support our parents. This is a travesty. We shouldn't have this. And what they were saying to me, what the LGBTQ community was saying was, I didn't read the whole book. I didn't put it in context. I think that's what Delegate Krizek was talking about. I don't have to take, if I bite into an apple and the apple is rotten, I don't have to eat the whole apple to determine it's rotten. These books were rotten. They shouldn't be on the shelves. It's pedophilia. We don't want to teach our kids pedophilia, illustrations of pedophilia. I'm outraged at this. I just can't believe that someone wouldn't take a strong stance against this. And let me tell you, parents are upset. Parents are upset in the community like you wouldn't believe on this. It's palpable. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hayden. So our next question is about electricity regulation. We're going to start with Mr. Hayden, then go to Delegate Krizek. So here's the question. The average Virginian pays more for their electric utility bill than the national average. A phenomenon the Virginia Poverty Law Center says is because customers are overcharged by the monopoly electric utilities. If elected, Mr. Hayden, what would you do to make sure residents of the district are not overcharged?
Well, we have to work on these electric companies, these monopolies, if you will, Dominion Energy. They have control of this pricing, and we have to get that back from them. They got it during Terry McAuliffe's first term as governor, and hopefully it will be his only term as governor. And we need to wrest that control back from that, and then get people that are on the commission that can set the pricing for this. There's, where the high energy prices, the high cost of everything that we do in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And, they, in the last 2 years, when they've had the trifecta, the Democrats have raised taxes and fees across 127 different courses. And they're on everything. They've been, not only it goes from that nickel bag tax up to property values, it goes across the board to all kinds of fees, transfer taxes on real estate, which I deal with in my business. It's just gotten too expensive. They're too far into our pockets all the time to pull things out to fund these programs that they have. And we do, we pay too much. We pay too much for energy, but the result is to explore and use other energy, other sources, not just clean energy, but also fossil fuels, and use them efficiently and effectively so that people can have, a reasonable cost in the winter when those things spike. So thank you.
All right, same question to you, Delegate Krizek. The average Virginian pays more for their electric utility bill than the national average. A phenomenon the Virginia Poverty Law Center says is because customers are overcharged by the monopoly electric utilities. If elected, Delegate Krizek, if reelected, what will you do to make sure the residents in the 44th district are not overcharged?
Well, I've already done, and we have already, since the Democrats took over power just 2 years ago, we have passed a number of bills to move us in that direction, and we still need to continue towards that. One of the things that has to happen is the SEC must hold Dominion and the other utilities accountable. Fortunately, in 2020, we restored some of the SEC's oversight that had been their oversight powers that had been taken away under Republican rule, so that the commission can finally begin to rebalance the playing field a little bit. That oversight is critical into achieving zero carbon electricity grid by 2050, which frankly I think is too slow, and I'm hoping we can get there by 2035. And I think that's what Governor McAuliffe is calling for as well in his campaign. And the sooner we do so, the better, because we did pass the Virginia Clean Economy Act as well, and we have got to we've got to cut carbon as much as possible and go to sun and solar power and wind power. And I will give Dominion some credit. They are moving in that direction, and they have some major offshore wind power windmills that are coming online soon too. And that I think there's a pilot project that's already going. So that's the future for us, is to find other renewable energy sources and to get away from carbon as fast as possible.
All right, so next question is about election integrity. We're going to start with Delegate Krizek and then move to Mr. Hayden. So the issue of voting has become one of the central fault lines in American politics. So I want to ask you about the process of getting elected. Delegate Krizek, what will you do to combat voter suppression across Virginia? And what's your reaction to allegations about election security in Virginia?
Sorry. We have, when the Democrats came into power 2 years ago, we were one of the most difficult states to vote in. I think we were in the bottom 10% of states to vote in, be able to vote in. We were now, I think we were number 37 or something like that. Now we are number 12 easiest state in the country to vote in. We've enacted automatic voter registration. We've eliminated the photo ID requirement. We created no excuse absentee voting. I mean, I'll tell you about the no excuse absentee voting. The very first bill I introduced, one of the very first bills I introduced when I was in the minority, and we were a big minority. We only had 34 out of the 100. And I went to the Rules Committee with my bill, which was to for anybody over 85 to be able to vote on that Saturday, just that Saturday before Election Day, because that Saturday you would know what the weather would look like on Tuesday, whether it would be icy or anything. And if you were over 85, you could vote on Saturday when the weather was nice, and you wouldn't have to worry about falling or anything else. And you would think that the Republicans killed that bill. They didn't even give it much of a hearing at all. And we have now gotten rid of all. There used to be about 20 excuses. Now it's no excuse. We also made Election Day a state holiday. And one of my bills was to pass postage prepaid absentee ballot return envelopes. So when you return your ballot, you don't even need to put a stamp on it. You shouldn't have to pay even 55 cents to vote.
All right, Mr. Hayden, same question to you. What will you do to combat voter suppression across Virginia? And what's your reaction to allegations about election security in Virginia?
Well, I don't think there's voter suppression. I don't think asking someone to show identification to vote is an onerous task for them. They show a check if they're going to cash, they show their ID if they're going to cash a check. They show their ID if they're going to cross into another country. They have identification. And some reporters went out to minorities and said, look, they say minorities have trouble getting voter IDs, which is racist. but they said minorities have difficulties getting voter IDs, and it went out to Black and Latino voters. And they were insulted that they even thought about that they can't get a voter ID. I think I long for the days that we go back to election day. My opponent, the incumbent, said about election day. Now we have election season. Early vote opened on September 17th. We have 45 days of early voting, which is just outrageous. I mean, if you can't vote on election day, then you could have done an absentee ballot. And if you want to have a reasonable accommodation, maybe you could have some early voting in person, some, like the 10 days when all the satellites open up before election day next week, or later this week, but not to have election season, a month and a half of early voting in person is too much. But we're taking advantage of that. We're encouraging our side to go out and vote early and vote in person. So we'll do what we can. But we need to, we need to watch. We have a lot of poll watchers out there. Thankfully, we'll keep an eye on this election, and people will trust again in the election process. And I don't think there's any voter suppression. I think that's just something to get additional voters that maybe shouldn't be able to vote. So.
All right, a couple of questions about economics. This first one, I guess we're going to start with Mr. Hayden and then go to Delegate Krizek. Mr. Hayden, do you support requiring private employers to offer 5 paid sick days a year?
Well, I don't know about having 5 sick days. It's going to depend on, I think, on the size of the company, their wherewithal to do that. I think anybody who works for a decent and reasonable company, or even for an individual, that they, if they have reasonable reasons to be out, that they can be out, they can be paid for that. And like I said, it's going to depend on the size of the company and the type of business that it's in. But, I think there can be, as far as, the employment goes, they have to run these businesses. I don't know if we're going to touch on the $15 minimum wage, and I know that's been a pet project of Delegate Krizek, but that doesn't work for businesses. It sounds good. It sounds like you're, really care about them and, worried about them, but businesses can't afford to pay that right out of the gate, pay someone $15 an hour. Businesses that never opened hire 0 employees. So it's just not reasonable. But it comes on the business. I think businesses need to decide what they can afford and not afford. And if workers aren't happy there, then workers won't work there and they'll go someplace else. Then they'll have to do that. But it's a free market that determines that. It's not the government coming in, laying in these heavy regulations. We shouldn't force these employers to pay this when they can't pay a $15 minimum wage, or 5 days of paid leave, or 10 days of paid leave. That's the economy. The market economy drives that. And that's what I got to say. Thank you.
Delegate Krizek, same question to you. Do you support requiring private employers to offer 5 paid sick days a year?
Not only do I support it, but I've been fighting for it for the past 3 years with Delegate Guzman, who has been championing this bill in the House. It is very important. I think the pandemic makes it very clear that we must pass paid sick leave at least 5 days. 1.2 million Virginians do not have paid sick time. A lot of them, or family leave, a lot of them are childcare workers. 75% of childcare workers don't have paid sick time. Do you really want them going to work sick and infecting your children? Do you really want to have folks have to be forced to go to work sick because they can't afford to take time off without pay, or they'll lose their job in some cases? So I think it's very important, and 5 days is not a lot to ask for. Most countries in the world have, in Europe, they have much more aggressive sick leave than we do. We should not encourage folks to spread diseases or miss work. I just want to say something about about voting. I want to make it clear that we do not have, that 45 days of voting is not too much voting. I don't think you can have too much voting. And that's, why is that a bad thing? I don't understand why that's a bad thing. But anyway, I just wanted to, we fought voter suppression. You see what's happening around the country, and we are doing the opposite. And I think we're in the right direction there. And the minimum wage going up to $15, it's over a few years. I'm glad. People need to be paid. And I'm fighting for that minimum wage to move up as fast as possible.
Well, actually, since we are talking about the topic of minimum wage, let me ask a question on that to both the candidates. I'll start with Delegate Krizek and then move to Mr. Hayden. Should Virginia have a minimum wage? I mean, sort of philosophically, is it a good idea to have a minimum wage, and what should it be? Delegate Krizek, we'll start with you.
Well, I mean, there's a federal minimum wage, which hasn't gone up in 12 years, and it's $7.25. And we have passed legislation that moves the minimum wage up, I think, to $9.50 or something over 2 or 3 years. And then we have we have to have another bill to move it all the way up to $15. You hear that Governor McAuliffe is running on supporting that effort, and I think you can be sure it's $9.50 now. Then it goes to $12. Then it goes up to $15. So it's graduated. It was $7.25 just a year and a half ago. So we up here in Northern Virginia, frankly, no one can pay less than $15 anyway. And most of the state, it's getting that way. People are complaining that they can't find people to work. Well, it's because a lot of it's because they're not paying them. And we need to get the minimum wage up. We need people to, another of my issues is also wage theft and worker misclassification. So one of the ways you get around, paying people is by paying them as an independent contractor. Then you don't have to pay unemployment insurance. You don't have to pay payroll tax. And the taxpayers are getting ripped off. Other businesses that play by the rules are getting ripped off. And certainly the workers are getting exploited. And you see that too. And that's something I'm very much working towards changing as well in the General Assembly, and we'll continue to do so next session.
Okay, so same question to Mr. Hayden, just on a philosophical grounds, should Virginia even have a minimum wage? And if so, what should it be?
Well, I don't think they should have a minimum wage. We have the federal minimum wage. It's like Delegate Krizek said, $7.25. It sounds virtuous to go out and give people $15 an hour, but it's just not tenable. It doesn't work as a business model. Most of our businesses are small businesses. And when they're drawing up their business plan to open a business, if they draw it up at $15 an hour per worker, they can't open. They can't afford that at the beginning. And it's not, and someone who makes $7, $8, $10 an hour, those are normally entry-level jobs or jobs that you can move on to other jobs or move up in that particular job or occupation. So there's an opportunity there to do that. We've all started out at minimum wage. I've done it at minimum wage when I was younger. That's the way it works. And as you grow in experience, you gain knowledge and you move up and you become more valuable and you can pay them. But if you pay someone off the start $15 and you have someone who's been working there for 3 or 4 or 5 years, the past 3, 4, 5 years, and they're making $12, now you're putting somebody in to get 15 and they've been working their way up to 12. There's no fairness to it. The market has to determine this, and it's virtuous just to say give them $15. It's easy to spend this money. Just give it to them. Just give it to them. Just make them do it, and that's not fair. The government can't do that. That's heavy-handed on the government's part, and it just makes them feel better because they're sitting in their ensconced in their upper middle income neighborhoods, and they feel better about themselves because they're doing something for the poor and the underserved. But it just doesn't work. It's not feasible. Let the market determine what people get paid. That's the way it works in a market economy, in a capitalist economy, not a socialist economy.
All right. Question about economics. We'll start with Mr. Hayden, then go to Delegate Krizek. Is the elimination of the sales tax on groceries currently at 2.5%, is eliminating that sales tax the best way to help working class people? Mr. Hayden, the floor is yours.
Well, yeah, I do think eliminating the grocery tax. There's only 11 other states in the union that have a grocery tax. And eliminating it is going to be helpful, certainly to working class. And that's the thing you got to look at, is these are the people who are impacted the most, because proportionately these taxes affect them the most. And it shouldn't be that way. It's the grocery tax. It's the recently enacted bag tax in Fairfax County. One of the wealthiest counties in the nation has put a nickel bag tax in. They put this in DC years ago. And I thought, thank goodness I live in Virginia. I don't have to deal with this nickel bag tax. Not that I couldn't afford a nickel a bag. It doesn't affect me as much, but it certainly affects the poor and the disenfranchised. Because at a nickel a bag, I saw a family of 4 walking the other night, and they had to have at least 20 to 25 bags So that would have been an extra $1 to $1.25 they had to spend as they walked from Walmart across Route 1 back into Gum Springs, into the Sherwood Hall precinct. And I watched them. I thought every time they do that, and they do that multiple times a month, that's money that they could use for other things, maybe for food. But we put a bag tax, another virtuous bag tax on there, because it said that way they'll learn how to deal with the environment. And bags don't affect the environment. They don't have a negative effect on the environment. They can be recycled and reused. So, you know, I just eliminated the grocery tax, cutting the state income tax in half, cutting taxes in general will free up the economy, unchain the economy, and let the economy grow. We just can't, we got to get our hands out of these people's pockets. We work too hard for our money. It's outrageous. The
right.
amount of increases that, you know.
Okay, Delegate Krizak, same question to you. Is the elimination of the sales tax on groceries currently at 2.5%? Is that the best way to help working class people?
Let me just say also that regarding the minimum wage, that, you know, most minimum wage workers are over 35. It's not just kids out of high school. These are people who have children. The minimum wage is at $7.25 is way too low. $15 is not even really a living wage, but it's about the fairest start we can come up with. But I just want to make that clear that this is still, you know, it's a myth that it's just high school kids. As far as the bag tax goes, it's a tool to be able to clean up the creeks and rivers and going all the way out into the ocean. I don't know about you, but I've seen the videos of the huge there's like the size of Texas floating in the Pacific Ocean. There's one in the Caribbean and there's one out in the Atlantic Ocean of just plastic trash floating in. You know, there's much more underneath in the ocean as well. And a lot of it's plastic bags. I have cleaned up Little Hunting Creek with Senator Servell and others, and local communities like Gum Springs has come out and done a lot of cleanups too. And plastic bags is one of the #1 pollutants that we find. As far as the grocery tax goes, it is money that is used by the county. But I agree that, we're moving towards getting rid of it. It's something that does hurt lower income people disproportionately, and we probably do need, we do need to get. I'm not on finance, but if I was, I would certainly introduce a bill to get rid of it. I'm sure we will next session.
All right. Our next question is about preventing gun violence. We're going to start with Delegate Krizak and then move to Mr. Hayden. So, Delegate Krizak, do you support banning assault weapons?
Yes.
Would you care to elaborate?
Is that 2 questions?
Well, I was just going to ask you about banning assault weapons. Do you support the effort to ban assault weapons? That hasn't really gone too far in the General Assembly. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, it did go pretty far. We got it over to the Senate. It passed the House. I think it was 1 or 2 votes away from passing the Senate. So I'm sure somebody will bring that bill up. I'm not in that committee that hears that. But I think right now you cannot. I see folks walking around with long guns strapped to their back, and it's intimidation and trying to. I don't understand it. Why you would do that? You would go to go to the coffee shop with a gun, with a big rifle on your back, or anything that even that maybe not even assault weapons, but people have the definition of assault weapon. I think is the devil in the details that we have to work out. But yeah, no, I don't own a gun. I don't think you need to own a gun. It's funny, a lot of people move out into the countryside because they feel safer, and guess what they do? They buy guns when they move out there. It doesn't make sense to me. I understand that there are hunters, and I respect their rights. But I'm I think the Second Amendment, it's in the Constitution, so I support it. But I don't think it is a carte blanche to be able to for everybody to have guns of mass destruction.
And Mr. Hayden, same question. Do you support or oppose a ban on assault weapons?
Well, I'm not 100% sure what you mean by assault weapons. If you mean like AR-15s or other rifles like that, I don't. It says the Second Amendment says a right to bear arms shall not be infringed, and it's a Second Amendment right. So we have the right to own weapons, and understand guns don't kill people. People do. The more people are killed with knives and sharp instruments, sharp-edged instruments than with guns every year. So it's not the guns, it's not getting guns control. And I certainly don't want to, I am a gun owner, I own multiple guns, and I do it for protection. I do it for self-protection. I also do it for sport. So and I've taught my sons that. I've taught them how to use guns, to use them safely and properly. And they're very good shots too. So, but the thing is, and we did that in Boy Scouts. We taught boys how to use 22 rifles, single shot 22 rifles. So, and just to teach them gun safety, they didn't have to use guns. But it's important that we have that franchise. We don't want to disenfranchise people from owning guns. I don't know where Paul buys his coffee, but I buy coffee. I don't see anybody with long guns when I buy coffee, at least in Northern Virginia. Maybe it's different when he's down in Richmond. But I think it's obviously it's a Second Amendment right. We need to protect that, and we don't want the government to have the guns. You look at what happened in Australia. They took the guns away in the 1990s, and people are being suppressed. You never want the government to be the only ones to own guns, and that's, I think, the only separating us right now from more oppression.
All right, question about reproductive rights. We're going to start with Mr. Hayden and then go to Delegate Krizek. So up until a few years ago, there were lots of restrictions on women seeking an abortion. You had to get an ultrasound, you had to wait 24 hours, the abortion clinic had to meet hospital construction standards. Would you bring those back?
Well, you call it reproductive rights. Let's call it what it is. It's abortion. It's terminating a pregnancy of a live child inside a woman's womb. So that's what we're talking about. It's not reproductive rights. The reproductive rights are before the child is formed. I believe life begins at conception, and I believe you should respect the life from conception till natural death. Those restrictions that were in place before, like the 24-hour ultrasound restriction. So a woman goes into an abortion center and gets an ultrasound. She has to wait 24 hours before she can have the procedure. I think that's important because it gives her time to think about it, gives her time to see what her options are. I wish at that time they had an opportunity to see the picture on the ultrasound. They didn't have to show it to them. They just had to have the ultrasound. So, these are reasonable restrictions that we can have as we debate whether or not we want to terminate human lives at certain points. People say 20 weeks, but I know that my opponent supports abortion, taxpayer-funded abortion, full term, all 9 months, up to and after birth. And I just wholeheartedly disagree with that. I believe that we can start with reasonable restrictions and go from there. I do support women. We need to spend money and resources on women who are in crisis pregnancies to give them alternatives. And that 60% of the babies who are killed through abortion are children of color. And it's a genocide. It's basically a Black genocide, but there's a lot of Latino babies too. So we need to stop that. And that's a good point. Let's stop abortion. Thank you.
Delegate Krizek, same question to you. So until very recently, women seeking abortions in Virginia had a lot of restrictions they had to deal with. They had to get an ultrasound. They had to wait 24 hours. The abortion clinic had to meet hospital construction standards. What are your thoughts on potentially having those restrictions returned to Virginia?
You know why that we don't have those anymore is because in the last 2 years, the Democrats have taken over the House and the Senate, and we have the governor, and we have rolled those restrictions back. I firmly believe in the right to choose. Abortion is healthcare and should always be safe, legal, and accessible. Whether or not to have a child remains a private healthcare decision, but should really remain between a woman and her physician, her doctor. And it should not be something that legislators interfere with. And most Virginians agree with me. I'm afraid to tell Mr. Hayden, 55% of Virginians support legal abortion. And let me just say, regarding the whole 9 months nonsense, and I know, and everybody listening knows that's a bunch of bull and malarkey. And infanticide is and always will be illegal in Virginia. I certainly would never support it. And the insinuation that me or any other Virginia legislator supports that is really, frankly, it's disgusting. And I'm very, I'm a bit incensed that you would say that, and it's really not, it's not the case at all. I'm worried that I know what I've seen, that you're against abortion in any case, including rape and incest of the mother, and you're on the record saying that, and you're also on the record online. I found that that you answered a questionnaire to that effect. So if you were the delegate, we would be having Texas style restrictions on abortion. So I think you're being very disingenuous, and you're certainly making a false accusation.
Well, actually, since we went there, I'd like to give the opportunities to the candidates an opportunity to further this discussion. Well, let me ask both the candidates here, starting with Delegate Krizak, and then we'll move to Mr. Hayden, about that Texas bill that you mentioned, Delegate Krizak. Would you support a Texas-style abortion limitation bill here in Virginia? We'll start with Delegate Krizak and then go to Mr. Hayden.
No, no way, and absolutely not.
Mr. Hayden.
Well, let me say that back in 2019, Paul was a co-sponsor on a late-term abortion bill with Kathy Tran. He co-patroned the bill. He wasn't just a sponsor, he was a co-patron. And it was a late-term bill that Governor Northam was on camera talking about, that if a baby's born alive on a table, they leave it there, give it some comfort care, and then the baby can either survive or not survive. That's a bill that he co-sponsored. So it's not something, I'm not making this up out of whole cloth. This is something he did and put his name on. So that's where I got that information. As far as the Texas bill, that's the heartbeat bill. Listen, I said that life begins at conception. We have unique DNA and unique fingerprints that will never be replicated. It's a human being. At 3 weeks, the heart starts to develop. At 6 weeks, the baby, the fetus, let's call it the fetus, because that's what the abortion industry calls it, which supports his campaign, Planned Parenthood. The fetus has a heart, a heartbeat. It has fingers and toes. It's developing, all the human organisms. It's a baby. Let's call it what it is. You want to call it a fetus, that means little one in Greek. It's a child. It's a baby. If a woman gets raped, all the feelings that she has with the rape, the low self-esteem, the suicidal depression, the less than, all that stuff, it gets repeated with an abortion. And a woman who has an abortion is 7 times more likely to commit suicide than a woman who goes to term with a pregnancy. So these are all issues you don't want to face, because you don't want to face the fact that it's a human being that's being aborted, that is a child, a boy or girl that's being killed through abortion. Sorry if I feel compassionate about that, but that one I agree with. You're right. I do support reasonable restrictions right now as we move the debate and the conversation.
All right, I want to ask now, move the conversation over to vaccine mandates. So we're going to start with Mr. Hayden and then go to Delegate Krizak. What is the role of the state here in terms of vaccine mandates? When is it appropriate for Virginia to mandate vaccinations? And when would it be inappropriate for Virginia to mandate vaccinations? Mr. Hayden, we'll start with you, then go to Delegate Krizak.
Okay, well, there's a saying on the pro-abortion side, it's my body, my choice, I guess, except if you don't want to get a vaccination, right? So they want to force vaccinations. We shouldn't. It's an individual's choice. It's a healthcare matter. I mean, let's turn it just on the abortion question. It's between a person and his doctor whether they should get it. People have medical conditions. They have spiritual or religious exemptions they may want to pursue. They just may not want to get the vaccination for whatever reason. That should be their choice. No one should be forced. We live in a free society. You can choose to get it or not. So, there should never be a time when we force, and we can see what's happening around the world. And in, that people are, and in the industries, look at the airline industry, look at some of the hospitals having to shut down. There's a hospital that had to shut down its ER and trauma unit because they didn't have enough nurses, because they were trying to force them to have vaccinations, which makes me a little bit suspicious when somebody in the healthcare industry doesn't want to get the vaccination. That makes me concerned that maybe they have some concerns about the vaccination. So again, it comes back to freedom of choice as to what people want to do and what they want to put into their bodies. I don't think forced vaccinations is the way to go, and I don't think that's the America that I grew up in and I want to see continuing on. So, thank you.
All right, Delegate Krizak, same question to you. What is the role of the state here in terms of vaccine mandates? When is it appropriate for Virginia to mandate vaccinations? And when might it be inappropriate for Virginia to mandate vaccinations?
We are in Mount Vernon, and President George Washington, when he was General George Washington, he had a vaccine mandate to inoculate all of his troops against smallpox in 1777. It was a mandate, saved a lot of lives. I support vaccine mandates to protect against COVID-19. Yes, this has become a pandemic of the unvaccinated. A staggering 1 in 500 Americans have died of COVID-19 since last March. It's been 18 months now. I follow the science and I reject the dangerous misinformation that leads to deaths of our citizens. And it's awful. And that people are falling for, snake oil salesmen out there, any other way to do it, but get vaccinated. Vaccinations are working, and it significantly reduces the risk of infection and the spread. We'd already have defeated this COVID-19 if everybody had gotten, if we had gotten about 20% more folks vaccinated. It's about 100% effective against hospitalization and death. Serving and protecting public health is about as American as you can get, and that's what delegates do. That's our job. That's the priority of being an elected leader, is to protect us. And so, yes, I encourage everyone who can to get vaccinated as soon as you can. And if you have any problems, if you need help getting vaccinated, please contact my office. I'll be happy to help.
All right, I want to ask about campaign finance reform. We're going to start with Delegate Krizak, then move to Mr. Hayden. So Virginia right now is the Wild West. There are no restrictions on campaign finance, no limitations. Is it time for Virginia to have some kind of limitations on campaign finance contributions? Delegate Krizak?
Yes. The one thing Virginia does do right is that we have it all. There is a light shined on our, we have to go online and file our campaign finance reports and show all of our donations over $100. Frankly, I think we should show all of our donations from $1 and up. But there's a lot of campaign finance reform that needs to happen, and I think that's going to happen. And I also post my campaign finance records on my website, so people can see that rather than trying to hunt it down through the Google. And it is something that's important, and that'll be one of my issues I'll be working on this next session. And remember, again, the Virginia General Assembly has only been in Democratic hands 2 years. We've gotten a lot done, and this is one of the issues that we've put off a little bit. But we have made some progress, but we have more progress yet to make.
Mr. Hayden, same question to you. So Virginia is currently the Wild West. There are no limitations on campaign finance contributions. Should Virginia have some kind of limitations on campaign contributions?
Yeah, yes, I agree with that. They should have limitations on that, because there's no limitation on the out-of-state money that can come in. My opponent is awash in special interest money. If you look at his list of campaign donors, the top donors are all people that'll have an influence on him on the various committees he sits on, like the ABC and the Alcohol and Beverage Control and the Gaming Subcommittee for the Appropriations Committee that he's on. His money's coming in from those companies that want to push casino gambling, which is a real tax on the poor. You want to talk about caring about people? That's a tax on the poor, having these casinos. But when you're getting $75,000 and $100,000 total donations from them, you're going to listen to them. You're not going to listen to your constituents. So yes, we need to have a reform of that, because the outside money, the money that comes in from out of state, can influence elections. And I think it influenced it in 2017 and then in 2019, when the Democrats won the House of Delegates back and won the Senate. They did it because of outside dark money that came in. And it happened on a granular level too, on the Commonwealth Attorney and the school boards. Toscano got $400,000. The Loudoun County, the Arlington County Commonwealth attorneys got outside money, got Soros money, open society money. So, they shouldn't be coming into our state and influencing our elections. It should be up to the people to decide who's going to represent them, not these outside influences that, just want to push their depraved programs.
All right. A question about policing reforms. We'll start with Mr. Hayden, then go to Delegate Krizak. Is it time to end qualified immunity for police officers?
No, we should have qualified immunity for police officers. I know my opponent has voted against that. He voted against raises for sheriff deputies. He voted against raises for regional jail personnel. He's for defunding the police, because he's going to say about equity. He's going to talk about community policing. Those are all buzzwords for defunding the police. We don't want that in Virginia. Okay, we want to protect our men and women in uniform who go out every day to risk their lives to protect us, our families, and our property. I think it's incomprehensible, and it's a disgrace. You want to talk about disgraces? It's a disgrace to pull money from them, to not vote on that. His thing will say he voted for raises that were in the budget for state police. It was, that kind of a perfunctory thing. That doesn't cover them because they don't want to do this, because this goes to their woke ideology about defunding the police. We need to support our men and women. We don't need to get rid of qualified immunity. It protects law enforcement from frivolous lawsuits. I'm an attorney. Paul is an attorney. We carry professional liability insurance to protect us against lawsuits. Doctors carry medical malpractice insurance to protect them against negligence. But if you take away qualified immunity from police officers, you take away their protection when they go out to defend us, and they defend us and they go into the worst situations and they lose their lives. A 26-year-old officer just lost his life. I think it was down in Alabama. He went on his first shift. He had a 6-month-old baby, and it was 1 o'clock in the morning. He got shot in the head and killed. And he's leaving his wife and his 6-month-old baby out there. And he's 26 years old, but he did it because he defended us and was defending that community. And we have to defend them and support them. And anything to the contrary is unacceptable.
All right, Delegate Krizak, question about policing reform. Is it time to end qualified immunity for police officers in Virginia?
Yes, and I did vote to get rid of qualified immunity and making reporting of bad behaviors by officers mandatory as well, which is a bill we passed. And now that is the law, that if a police officer sees bad behavior by another, he has to report that police officer. We need to hold officers who act in bad faith accountable for their actions. If you don't follow the law, you don't need, if you follow the law, you don't need to worry about this. And there are insurance policies that the localities have, the local government has. So it's very similar to the insurance that we have as attorneys. But let me say, I do not support defunding the police, and that's a lie. And he knows it because we've already talked about this at a previous forum. And, in 2020, I was recognized as the state police legislator of the year. The reason we are raising the police salaries now is because under 20 years of Republican rule, they were underpaid. This year, we approved an 8% pay raise, the highest ever for the state police, alongside bonuses of $5,000, as well as $1,000 for state-funded sheriff officers and workers at regional jails. And we also had it during the special session. We included another $20 million in the budget for the Department of State Police for a compensation plan for sworn law enforcement officers. We have about a 350 member. We need 350 more state troopers. That's how, we have a situation with recruitment and retention. And we are also providing educational incentive of 5% annually for sworn employees of all ranks that get an associate's degree. So you can't say that I'm or defunding the police.
All right. Looking at the clock, I see we have run out of time. So we're going to move into our closing statements. A note to our timekeeper that the candidates will have 2 minutes for the closing statements. We are going to start with Delegate Krizak, who's got the first 2-minute closing statement, and then move to Mr. Hayden. So Delegate Krizak, the floor is yours.
Sorry. I started 6 years ago as your delegate, and we were in the minority, and we were at 34, and we had Terry McAuliffe was our governor, and he was a brick wall against a lot of very right-wing damaging legislation that the Republicans were passing. And we had just enough people in the House to support his vetoes. He vetoed more bills than any governor in history. We need him back, and we need to get out and vote this November 2nd or earlier. You have a clear choice in this election. On the one hand, you have an extremist who doesn't believe in the science and worships at the altar of Trump. And you have me, a very proud Democrat, proud of my community, an experienced community leader who grew up here and raised a family here, and now has the seniority in the legislature to push forward the priorities of our community. My voting record speaks for itself. I've kept my campaign promises to our district, and I ask for your vote on November 2nd to continue to represent you in Richmond. Thank you very much for coming tonight, and I always am there for you, and I look forward to any questions, and if you email me at any time, I will respond. Thank you very much, and thank you to my opponent, Mr. Hayden. I'm glad he ran again. I think it's important. I look forward to him running again next year and the year after if we have the elections as he predicts.
All right, Mr. Hayden, the floor is yours for a 2-minute closing statement.
All right, thank you, Michael. And thank you again to the League of Women Voters and to yourself and to Ethan and for putting this forum together. It is important to have opposing viewpoints, which is why I ran in 2019, because Delegate Krizek had been elected twice without an opponent. So I thought he needed an opponent, more of a punching bag, I guess, in 2019. Hopefully I'll do a little better this time. And my condolences go to him and his wife on the loss of your parents, who were very good and contributing members of the community. I know your father was Catholic. I know the pastor at my church gave him last rites and communion at the end. And, you know, it's hard to lose parents. It certainly is. And I understand that, even if they're in their 90s, and God bless them for living that long and having a fruitful life. And I just wish they did better raising their son, you know, to see the light here. There's a lot to be said for, you know, having both voices. I feel like I'm certainly in the mainstream, more of a common sense person, legislator at this point. I mean, I'm talking about issues that I would have never dreamed of talking about in 2019. Lowering taxes is like the 4th or 5th issue, might have been my top issue in 2019. You know, there is a certain, you know, woke ideology on the other side, you know, and that's a term that's thrown around. And, you know, what it leads to is it leads to this mentality where they don't respect the police. When they say defund the police, they don't respect them. And then that 26-year-old officer gets shot in the head at 1 o'clock in the morning because no one has respect for his life. It's respecting lives for the children in the womb. And that's where life begins. And that's where you got to really start the respect. It's critical race theory, which is unacceptable. It's vile and immoral to teach people to judge people on the basis of their skin color and, you know, their sexual orientation, whatever it is. It's just critical race theory is wrong. Boys and girls bathrooms is wrong. Calling parents who go to school board meetings domestic terrorists is wrong. That's wrong. And we got to stop these wrongs. This is unacceptable. And I'm saying this as a citizen and a parent, not only as a candidate, but this is what people are telling me. And I'm amazed at the people I meet out there on the trail and these secret meetings we have, that people are just super upset about this. You don't understand how upset they are and how insulted they are. They get treated this way. We're tired of getting treated like that. We're tired of being second-rate citizens.
All
we need
right.
change.
Well, I'd like to thank the candidates for speaking this evening. I'd like to thank the viewers for sticking with us. We've had a lot of issues discussed this evening. I hope the viewers have been able to get a good sense of the differences between the candidates and where they stand on the issues. If you have any questions we didn't get a chance to get into, you can send them to the League of Women Voters at lwv.fairfax.org and look for candidate forums to submit questions there. Keep in mind, many of the rules around elections have changed, so you can check out vote411.org for the latest on how to vote. Thank you for being here. I'd like to remind you that voting has already begun, so get out and vote and have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for watching.